CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: the deadline for oxygen supplies passes for the missing submarine near the Titanic as more specialist teams join the search. Our other headlines: an explosion at this restaurant in China on the eve of a national holiday. At least 31 people have died. China's premier urges deeper cooperation with France as he continues his first overseas trip since taking office. And the Dragon Boat Festival in full swing in China. Traditional boat builders say business is roaring ahead. The rescue operation for the missing submarine exploring the Titanic has reached a critical point, with the supply of oxygen on board now believed to have run out. This comes as the first underwater robot reaches the ocean floor to try to transmit images to the surface. Contact with the submarine, which has 5 people on board, was lost on Sunday as it made its descent to the wreck off Newfoundland in Canada. Well, the rescue mission is being run from Boston in the United States. Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther is there for us. Philip, what's the latest you have on the search and rescue operation?
Yeah, this is the best place to get those updates from the Coast Guard. We've had a daily press conference from them and expecting another one hopefully today. Some of the background sound, by the way, that you are hearing right now comes from the Coast Guard that is right next to us. The rescue mission, by the way, in that remote part of the Atlantic Ocean, it is getting bigger and it's getting more international by the day as time runs out, though. Those 96 hours of oxygen remaining for those 5 people on board the Titan submersible, they, in theory, come to an end today, might have done a few hours ago. Of course, we don't have a precise countdown here. These were numbers given to us by the company that leads these expeditions to the Titanic and to the ocean floor, but numbers also that have been used by the Coast Guard since then. So in terms of the ships that are in that area right now, one key addition today, it is the Atalante. This is a French research ship on board a robot that, according to the US Coast Guard, is now at work already on the seabed of the Atlantic Ocean looking for the Titan submersible. As we speak, it is pretty much seen as the best option to find, first of all, the vessel and then potentially, of course, also those 5 people alive inside of it. Now, again, we expect to get an update from the US Coast Guard a little bit later today here in Boston.
At what point does this become a recovery operation rather than a search and rescue?
Well, I think that will be made official to us by the US Coast Guard. They are the ones who are essentially coordinating this rescue mission. And yesterday, when they spoke to us, they did insist that this is still 100% a rescue operation. And that means that there is still hope of finding these 5 people alive. Of course, there has to be hope. That there has to be some kind of optimism is almost a mantra, of course, among the family members who are hoping for good news, among the rescuers as well, of course, some of whom are only arriving on the scene right now. But the harsh truth might have to be revealed at some point. And remember that one of the options as to what happened to this vessel is that it's essentially disintegrated when contact was lost on Sunday already. No parts of this vessel have been found. That is one of the reasons why there is hope that these people are still alive. And add to that, that sounds were heard 2 days in a row that could have come from that vessel, could have been signs of life. Very little of this can be confirmed, of course, by the authorities here.
Philip, thank you for that. Philip Crowther from the Associated Press in Boston in the United States. Let's talk now to Steve Nagovitz, the marine archaeologist at Stockton University in New Jersey. Steve, good to see you. Welcome. Given your experience, considering the depth at which this search is being conducted, what are the difficulties associated with searching for anything in this kind of environment? I mean, how does the depth impact the search operation?
Well, it's a complicated search because it's a large area, but they're also aided by the fact that there's a complete mapping of the Titanic wreck site that's been done, I think, completed just this year. And it's a virtual sonar map of the entire area. So they could use that as the base for looking for things that aren't in that area that they previously mapped, which could be this submarine. So that can narrow their search a little bit if they use that as a guideline. But dragging a sonar or using a remotely operated vehicle, an ROV, is just a matter of time covering space. And as the clock winds down on available power and oxygen for the people in the submersible, that's the biggest issue.
Do you think people should be diving to the wreck of the Titanic, given how clearly dangerous it is?
Sure, why not? I mean, people line up to climb Mount Everest, K2. We go to the jungles. We look for we go to Antarctica, which is almost as unforgiving an environment as the bottom of the ocean. It's in human nature to explore and to want to know things. The only caveat I'd add is that we need to make sure that when we do those things, we go as safely as possible. But accidents happen. The Titanic itself was the most modern piece of technology in its time, and it sank on its first voyage. The Space Shuttle Challenger, all of our technology is wonderful, and it allows us to see the world, the stars, the bottom of the ocean, but it's fallible, and you have to take that into account.
It's so easy to think, isn't it, given sat-nav, radar, robotics, AI, that the oceans are now somehow smaller and shallower. But of course, as you suggest, they remain as challenging and as dangerous as ever, don't they?
It's interesting. We can go to the moon. We see live pictures from Mars, and it's relatively easy, not cheap, mind you, but easy to do that. The bottom of the ocean, however, is dealing with hundreds and hundreds, thousands of feet of water, and it has weight. And that pressure on the seafloor is the equivalent of an elephant standing on every square inch of our bodies. And it's hard to make a device, a submersible, a submarine, capable of withstanding that pressure. And as a result, we don't explore as much using submersibles because the remote technology is much simpler and it gives us a better picture of the bottom. And then when we want to take a closer look, then it's time to take the submersible down. Then it's time to be human. Let's take a look for ourselves.
Steve, good to talk to you. Thanks for your time and your expertise. Steve Nagrowicz, the marine archaeologist at Stockton University in New Jersey.
Thank you.
Now the rest of the day's news, and at least 31 people have been killed and 7 injured in an explosion that ripped through a barbecue restaurant in China. 9 people have been held for questioning over the incident. A gas leak is suspected to have caused the blast. It happened in the evening when the restaurant was busy ahead of the National Dragon Boat holiday. Our correspondent Sun Tian Yuan has the latest on the investigation.
I'm in northwest China's Yinchuan city, where a deadly explosion rocked a barbecue restaurant at around 8:40 last night during a peak dining time. Authorities have briefed media on the investigation, and the initial results indicate that the explosion was caused by a gas leak. Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged all-out efforts to treat the injured. The casualties have been taken to a nearby hospital last night. China's National Health Commission said this afternoon that all patients are in stable condition. Police have also detained 9 people related to the accident, including the manager, shareholders, and staff at the restaurant. Now, this is one of the deadliest accidents in China so far this year, and it happened a day before this year's Dragon Boat Festival, a traditional Chinese holiday. About 100 million trips are expected to be made during the 3-day holiday. That's up to around 30% compared to last year. Now, it is a time when many dine out with family and friends, and the deadly explosion here in Yinchuan will be a reminder to the public that safety is paramount. Sun Tianyuan, CGTN, Yinchuan, Ningxia Hui Autonomous Region.
Chinese Premier Li Qiang has put forward a three-point proposal on deepening cooperation with France. He outlined the need to strengthen ties during a speech at a dinner with the Chinese and French business communities in Paris. He's in the French capital as part of his first overseas trip since taking office and following his trip to Germany earlier in the week. The visit comes at a time when the European Union is seeking to reduce its economic reliance on Beijing. Well, our correspondent Ken Brown is in Paris for us. Ken, just talk us through what's happened so far.
Yes, we're here live from outside the Élysée Palace, where right now bilateral talks are happening between the Chinese Premier Li Qiang and French President Emmanuel Macron. Top of the agenda is expected to be similar to what we saw with Li's talks with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz a couple of days ago. The Ukraine conflict, the climate crisis, closer cooperation on green technology, and of course, the economy. Now, Li preempted these talks today by putting forward a three-point proposal on deepening China-France cooperation. As you mentioned just now, Jamie, three of those are maintaining security, stability of global supply chains, strengthening cooperation on innovation, and fostering a sound business environment. Now, Li delivered this speech at a dinner, a working dinner yesterday evening with Chinese and French business communities in Paris. Li expressed China's hope for win-win cooperation between France and China. As you mentioned also, the EU is considering a little bit of, not a distancing, but they think that they are over-dependent on China right now. They've ruled out any type of decoupling. We've heard that a number of times. But this over-dependence, the EU is thinking about diversifying its partners. Now, that's quite difficult when you consider the amount of money exchanged between France, Germany and China. Germany and France alone accounts for over $300 billion in 2022. France, over $80 billion. Now, on the business environment, Li talked on two of his favorite themes. One of those was continued efforts with opening up. He also talked about making it easier for new reforms to be pushed through for French and German companies to sell their products in China. He mentioned safeguarding the intellectual rights of Western companies there. Now, he's hoping, of course, for more cooperation on things like technological exchanges in medicine, new energy batteries, semiconductors, things like that. But it's going to be very interesting to hear what Emmanuel Macron and Li have to say.
Ken Brown, thank you for that. Our correspondent Ken Brown in Paris. US President Joe Biden is rolling out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his state visit to Washington. The two leaders are set to strengthen defense and technology ties with a slew of trade and defense agreements. Ahead of a state dinner at the White House, Prime Minister Modi will address the US Congress and hold a press conference with President Biden. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. John, why is Mr. Modi getting such a lavish state visit?
Well, Jamie, in short, in recent years, the political interests in the region, the Indo-Pacific region, with New Delhi have converged and started under President Obama, continued under President Trump, and now continues under President Biden. Biden calls the relationship between D.C. and New Delhi the defining partnership of 2021. It is, as he sees it, a way of keeping a check on China. I'm afraid, despite the success of last weekend's Blinken trip to Beijing, China remains the single biggest foreign policy obstacle to this administration, and that trip from last weekend by the Secretary of State to Beijing is now fading into the background quickly, particularly after rather injudicious remarks by the President of the United States towards the President of China. The thing is, Washington sees New Delhi as a partner to stabilize the Indo-Pacific region and to avoid war, in short, regarding Taiwan. Now, India is the member of a couple of key clubs, including the new one, the Quad, which also involves Australia, Japan, and the United States, of course, and BRICS, a very important regional gathering, a global gathering, really, that also involves, apart from India, Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa. And on top of that, India India has now overtaken China as the most populous country in the world, according to the United Nations. It is also a vibrant democracy, which is important to Washington, D.C. As you say, Narendra Modi is here. He was at the United Nations yesterday. Today, he will make a very rare and great honor, a joint address to a joint session of the Congress, and then he comes to the White House, where he will be given a lavish state dinner, and all the stops are being pulled out by the White House to make sure that the Indian delegation, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who you see here now at the White House this morning, these are live pictures coming in from Washington, D.C., that he is given the very best treatment at this time. Jamie?
John, we've been watching the live feed, and Mr. Modi standing shoulder to shoulder with the US president, but there are areas that they disagree on, aren't there?
I'm afraid there certainly are. You have to understand that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's party is the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party. It is very much allied to right-wing politics in India. It's been in power now since 2014, so that's approaching 10 years. And Modi himself has in the past been shunned by the authorities in the United States for severe violations of religious freedoms. Now, clearly, that has all been forgiven. There is a conflict for President Biden between what I've just talked about and the geopolitical need going forward. I mean, Modi has been accused by others of bigotry, press attacks and civil society attacks. 70 members of Congress have written a letter to Biden asking him to raise this with him. India won't want to be lectured. There are some trade deals coming up. I understand fighter jet engines, visas and space are on the agenda. And of course, many of the tech entrepreneurs, the biggest names, will be at the White House tonight to court Prime Minister Modi, because India is a major technological hub. On Wednesday, Elon Musk met him and told him he wanted to bring Tesla to India as soon as possible. Jamie.
John, thanks for that. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Caribbean migrants who changed the face of post-war Britain, the lives and the legacy of the Windrush generation, next.
Zongzi, the sticky rice dumpling, is no doubt the food of choice for many during the Dragon Boat Festival. Several things are needed to make the cute little bundles. Sticky rice, of course, as in its name, bamboo leaves, and string. The fillings vary in different parts of China. People in northern regions usually prefer sweet fillings like dried jujubes, raisins, or sweet potato, while in southern parts of the country, people favor the savory, like salted egg yolk, braised pork, and other kinds of meat. The first thing to do is to wash and soak the sticky rice for at least 2 hours. Get the rest of your ingredients ready, then the fun begins. Make a cone with a clean bamboo leaf, put the rice and your choice of fillings inside, wrap it up, and carefully tie it up. Then it's time to cook. Bring a pot of water to boil and gently drop in the zongzi. In the meantime, you can fix yourself a drink to go with the dumplings, because why not? And after 2 to 3 hours, voila! Bon appetit and happy Dragon Boat Festival!
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The deadline for oxygen supplies passes for that missing submarine near the Titanic as more specialist search teams join the operation. Our other headlines: an explosion at a restaurant in China on the eve of a national holiday. At least 31 people have died. And China's premier urges deeper cooperation with France as he continues his first overseas trip since taking office. Russia has accused Ukraine of attacking a bridge on the Crimean Peninsula with missiles supplied by the UK. No one was injured in the blast on the Chonhar Bridge, which is a key route linking Crimea to the Russian-controlled city of Melitopol. Moscow-backed authorities in the region claim the attack was ordered by London. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Zelensky says Russia is planning what he called a terrorist strike on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station in Ukraine that could involve the release of radioactive material. The Kremlin described that claim as another lie. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, what is Moscow saying about this attack on the Chonhar Bridge?
Well, the Russian officials insist that the Ukrainian armed forces have attacked the bridges on the administrative border of the Kherson region and Crimea near Chongar. Now, according to the acting head of the region, Vladimir Saldo, he says that the strike most likely has been carried out using the UK-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missile. That's why he says the strike has been ordered by London. He also said that the strike was an attempt to intimidate the local residents there and insisted that no casualties have been reported. The road has been indeed damaged, the traffic has been diverted, but the authorities there insist that it could be fixed in a short period of time, in a matter of weeks. Now, we have heard the Russian officials before saying that they would carry out a strike against the command centers of Ukraine. That's according to Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, if Ukrainian armed forces strike the territory of Russia, including Crimea, with the Western-supplied long-range weapons.
And what has President Zelensky been saying about these claims of an attack planned on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station?
Well, indeed, we have heard the accusations from the Ukrainian side that have been dismissed by the Kremlin. Moscow said that was yet another lie, that Moscow could have been planning an attack against the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So Moscow insists that that's another lie from the Ukrainian side, and also says that it has been in touch with the IAEA closely. It is interested in maintaining that contact. So we are expecting the visit of the head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, to Kaliningrad, where he will be holding talks about the security of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant with the head of Rosatom. So Moscow says that's yet another lie, and the Russian Federation is in constant contact with the IAEA.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. On this day in the year 1948, the Empire Windrush ship arrived in the United Kingdom, bringing almost 500 passengers from the Caribbean to fill chronic labour shortages in post-war Britain. It was the first of many such voyages carrying passengers who became known as the Windrush generation, who were all promised the right to stay indefinitely. Our correspondent Yolo Abdavid reports now on their rather checkered experiences of their new lives in the UK.
Many came in hope and anticipation because there were jobs available and a motherland to support. They arrived in a country still feeling the impact of a 6-year war.
When they came to this country, they were fighting already, and they had to choose their battles. And they had to choose those battles very carefully, because every day was a fight for them. You know, they had to fight the weather, they had to fight the environment, they had to fight the people, they had to fight for a place in this society.
Despite slow social acceptance, some flourished. Hazel Reynolds' family, with 11 siblings, supported each other and followed the Christian principles of their parents.
They're all full of hope for the future, so let's make them very welcome as they begin their new life.
In 1948, 500 Jamaicans arrived on the Empire Windrush, aiming for a better standard of living. Some argue that the migrants who emigrated from the Commonwealth countries after the Windrush docked are still fighting for recognition and equality today.
To what extent do we know about the Windrush community? To what extent do we know about diversity of communities within Britain? And furthermore, how many black teachers are there at high levels? How many black professors are there? How many individuals are employed at the highest levels of institutions in Britain?
Some let bygones be bygones and are successful in their respective fields. But for others, the struggle for equality goes on, despite the fact that the British government 75 years ago had invited Caribbean people to live and work as UK citizens at the same time as the National Health Service was established. To commemorate the Windrush generation, an original footbridge used in Tilbury Docks is now an exhibition called A Walkway of Memories.
30 families throughout the UK sent me photographs, sort of, I don't know, family memorabilia. And not only that, they sent tickets, they sent their contracts, some of them, of their parents when they had their first job. And I thought, you know, so that's where all the images came from.
There can't be many Windrush exhibitions as evocative as this walkway that thousands of people walk through to start a new life in a country that was struggling after the Second World War. They came for a better life. They succeeded despite the difficulties and despite the often burning injustice of racism. Yolo Ap David, CGTN, Tilbury Docks, London.
Much of East Asia is celebrating Dragon Boat Festival, the 5th day in the 5th lunar month. In China, sticky rice dumplings are on the menu for many, but the day is best known for dragon boat racing. And after coronavirus lockdowns, business is now booming for those who build the boats. Our correspondent Wang Tianyu reports.
The beat of the drums, the rush of water, and the swing of the paddles. It is that time of the year again as the traditional paddling sport, dragon boat racing, takes over China's rivers and lakes. The 3-day Dragon Boat Festival is in full swing this week. With 2,000 years of history, China's dragon boat races remains extremely popular below the Yangtze, where plenty of rivers offers perfect stage for competitive races, with each boat having about 20 to 50 paddlers and normally from the same village. Rowers here join forces together to demonstrate their robust teamwork, strength, and endurance. In the place where I'm in, a small town near southern China's city Guangzhou, the Dragon Boat Races is the biggest traditional civil activity in the year, lasting for nearly a month. And this year, as China relaxed its COVID-19 restrictions, the event is larger than ever. Thus, orders for dragon boats have seen a boom in recent days.
We received quite a lot of orders this year. The first orders came in during the second month of the lunar calendar, and orders now total over 20 dragon boats. We basically had to work overtime every night.
The craftsmanship of dragon boat making is considered a cultural heritage, with older people being the majority of workers. From cut to polish, each boat would take at least a week to make. In another traditional shipyard in Zhongtang town, this year's Dragon Boat Frenzy has forced the half-a-century-old manufacturing base to turn down some orders.
This year we have so many orders. I received orders for 9. I wouldn't dare to take on more when there are too many orders because I won't be able to manage them. We are already working 11 to 12 hours every day with barely any time to rest.
The boat itself is now the only business opportunity from the races. Uniforms, firecrackers, and even local delicacies contribute to the consumption derived from the event. Nowadays, the dragon boat racing has gone far beyond being just a competition. It gives people who work in cities away from their hometowns a great reason to come back. Some paddlers here told me they applied a couple of days off just to participate in the games, and more importantly, paddle together for their hometowns.
Our correspondent Wang Tianyu reporting. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. Much more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan this QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.